Morning, Claire. Thanks for joining me today.
It's a pleasure to be here, Martin. Thanks for having me.
So, where are you? Well, to tell people who are watching, where are you currently at and what are you doing in your life?
I hail from New Jersey
Yeah,
in the States. I'm on the beautiful New Jersey shoreline. I've been born and raised New Jersey, so I'm a lifelong Jersey girl.
Jersey. Now, we're currently hearing about this hurricane. Is it anywhere near you at the moment or?
Thankfully, this one seems to be sparing us. Unfortunately, it is battering the Gulf Coast right now. I have good friends that are in its path. Unfortunately.
Well, it's interesting because you've written a book with one of my great friends, Ben Baker, called Leadership Beyond the Crisis. Now, one of my memories was I was in Costa Rica 3 years ago and there was a hurricane and we
Mm.
were stranded in a beautiful part of the world. We couldn't get to San Jose, needed to kind of get out of the city, so we actually just had to book another night's accommodation. But the leadership of everybody around to make sure we're safe to get us out to San Jose and then get to our next destination is people just seem to work in a crisis and come together. Is that your experience?
It absolutely is. It's interesting because I think it takes crises periodically in our lives and our business in the world to remind us that the things that we tend to argue about, get sort of all heated up about,
Yeah.
um, when push comes to shove and people need our help, we sort of set those aside. So, I'm an eternal optimist, and I tend to at least try to look for the silver lining in crises like that. And so that's one that I always point to is that it tends to bring out the everyday heroics of people.
So everyday heroics. I have Addison's disease. Last week I was in hospital for 2 days and I spent 3 hours in the ICU section of emergency for the third time
Oof.
in 3 years. And the leadership was there from the outset. The ambulance, hospital staff, just make sure everything was there to set up that I would survive and be successful. JFK had Addison's disease, and I think he was the second best president after Obama. But again, I think we tend to look at leaders when there's a crisis and what they do. But for me, it's kind of what they do, but what do they do afterwards as well. So, why is your book called Leadership Beyond the Crisis?
So it's interesting, and just to speak to that, your specific experience, just for a moment, it's amazing. One of the things that makes people so heroic is their ability to stay calm in a crisis, right? Be that voice of reason, that expertise and that expert guidance that we so desperately
Hmm.
need
Yeah.
when the rest and struggling with the unknown. My relatively new colleague, Ben Baker, and I were introduced by a mutual friend through the power of LinkedIn earlier this year.
Yeah.
And so I'm in New Jersey on the east coast of the United States. He is in Richmond, British Columbia. If you were to throw two darts on the map of North America, you
Yeah.
probably could not pick two farther points away from each other. But we were introduced. As it happens on LinkedIn, hey, you guys should get on the phone and have a
Yeah.
conversation. And so we did, and found we had very kindred philosophies about leadership, and specifically in this time of COVID, in this time where we are under a global pandemic, where truly no one has all of the answers. And even if they do, the challenge sort of morphs and mutates every day, right? So there's always a new layer to the challenge. Um, and so we had a couple of conversations and we decided, you know what, let's start recording these and let's put them out on YouTube and just see what happens. And by the end of our run, when we felt we had given pretty good justice to the conversations, we ended up having 12 episodes, about
Wow.
12 hours worth of content. Um, and that was interesting enough. And we thought, okay, well, COVID, if you remember in the beginning, COVID was going to be a very short term
Mm.
nuisance, right? If we all just sort of sheltered in place for a couple of
Yeah.
weeks, it's going to be a blip on the screen. Well, lo and behold, that turned out not to be the case. Um, and so, we looked back at this conversation series that we had put together, and we said, there's a lot of insight in these conversations. What if we took, the transcripts, edited them, and put them into a book? And we both felt that this was something that would resonate, for months to come, and potentially for years to come. So it focuses primarily on, um, trying to remind leaders at any level that while we are in the midst of this crisis, and this is an unprecedented crisis in terms of the global scale of it, it is certainly not the first crisis leaders and companies and families have faced. It will not be the last. Um, and it is important with leaders that, in addition to focusing on those near-term priorities of keeping their employees safe, keeping the business running, keeping the lights on, they still need to maintain one eye on the horizon and continue to pull their business forward. And their employees are watching what they do.
So
And
I'm
if
going to
they are
call
not
out.
a voice of calm, right, in that
Yeah.
chaos, they're going to lose the faith of their employees.
So I'm going to say, hi, Christina. Glad to see you're not in hospital. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much, my friend. And I was on a Zoom chat about 3 months ago, and I was talking about being an openly gay male. And Christina just sent me a lovely message, and it just extended the hand of friendship. Now, today, we had a chat 5-10 minutes ago before we went live, and I said, today's Wear It Purple Day. And you instantly said, I'm going to get changed, because today is young LGBTQ people. It's their day. It's about raising awareness. So in Australia, 16% of gay men between 16 and 27 have attempted suicide. 20% of lesbian women have attempted suicide. And I think for trans people over the age of 18, over 30%. So today is just one day to raise awareness. Now, I've called out companies who are involved in Pride because it's good for their brand, but what are you doing every single day to create an environment where people can be comfortable and be who they are? Because the crisis could be somebody's personal life, it could be something that's happening, and them coming to work is an area where they can be themselves, they can be safe. But at the same time, people don't want to fear going into work. So that the crisis is more than COVID, is more than just whatever is happening that day. It's making sure things happen beyond a single event to make sure it doesn't happen again, or an even more detrimental event doesn't happen.
and the example that you just raised of somebody reaching out the hand of friendship, um, I have seen that to be the most difficult challenge and sacrifice during this pandemic is the separation, right?
Yeah,
A lot of people joked in the beginning, well, I'm an introvert. I've been training my whole life for this, and I get to stay at home and be insulated from the world. But as it dragged on, as we really came to grips with the reality that um, you know, both of my parents, thankfully, are still alive. I can see them, but I can't come within 6 feet of them. And, it's difficult to get together with family when we were finally able to do that again and not be able to hug them
yeah,
hello or goodbye, right? Um, and one of the things I think that this global pandemic has highlighted in ways, that we have not even seen before is that people that were already feeling somewhat disconnected, feeling somewhat marginalized, feeling misunderstood, this crisis has exacerbated those feelings of detachment, of loneliness, of loss, of grief. And so it's those little attempts, those little points of outreach to make a connection, whether they know it or not. I could see on your face when you said
yeah.
that, when she reached out that hand of friendship, it means the world to you. And she
It
probably
does.
didn't do it, out of, I'm going to be so magnanimous and reach out to Martin.
Yeah,
It was an instinctual um, impulse for her to do that. And boy, it makes all the difference in the world.
It's interesting, you'd be on a Zoom chat and somebody sends you that private message, just saying hello and thank you, and those things make a real difference. I have a husband who's African. I was in Cape Town 5 years ago, 6 years ago, sorry, and I visited Robben Island. And I remember beautiful African American ladies who were like end of apartheid. And then I mentioned I was gay, and I'm not going to name the country, but this lady was originally from that country, and she said, "By the way, we do not accept you in our culture. You'll be safe, but we do not accept you." So 1 minute it was end of apartheid, then the next minute it was one of the most homophobic comments I've probably experienced. Language closed everything. I could see in this lady deep hatred. Yet, literally 15 seconds earlier, we were all elated because, as human beings, we were against things like apartheid, and we wanted to celebrate the humanity, the courage of people. Yet, in that next moment, then she moved on, and I'm like, well, wow, what message are you signalling? Because there are
She
people.
moved on and left you shattered just by that one comment.
Yeah. So it's kind of.
What infuriates me about just that story, let alone just that general attitude, that judgment, that label, is that people can compartmentalize love and acceptance. In one breath, they can be screaming about the injustice of apartheid, and violence to certain segments of our society, and literally in the next breath condemn you because of who you are or how you live. We have become a global society where we compartmentalize love and acceptance, and it's shocking it's infuriating to me.
And that's why, honestly, Christina reaching out to me, it meant so much, because it's hand of friendship. It's also hand of friendship to my husband, because my husband is black and we can't live freely where he's from. We go and we just have to be two friends. And the world still needs to change. There's still so much prejudice. And I talk a lot about intersectionality, because I've called out about systemic racism. I've been called a white liberal, white apologist, ashamed of my race, a race traitor, because I have supported friends who've been commenting on LinkedIn, and I've gone, your comment is wrong, please leave my friend alone. He, she or they are calling out systemic racism. You may not disagree with it, but please treat my friend with respect. And then I get attacked, and honestly, it does not bother me in the slightest, because I talk about this because it's personal, it's my family. I want to live in a society where the colour of my husband's skin makes no difference to his opportunities in life and his safety. And we're not even there yet in 2020. And I
We're not.
see how quickly it got to moving on to statues, monuments, the looters. And wait a minute, people are out there asking for fairness. They're asking to be treated equally during a crisis. And leadership means these people are leading, and I stand with my friends, with my family, because they stand with me. And I think we've had seen leadership from people this year.
Yeah, we really have. And I think it comes back to, Ben Baker says all the time, leadership is not a title, it's a mindset, right?
Yeah.
And we were in a conversation earlier this week about the need in the business, at the business level, to get away from the manager title, because people don't need to be managed, right? You can manage processes, but people need to be led. They need to be inspired. They need to be embraced, and they're looking for connection. And you don't just leave your identity at the door when you report to work. It
No.
is it's to say it's part of you is an understatement, obviously, but it so informs your worldview, your talents, your passions, your aversions to certain things. And one of the things that we talk about in the book is this notion of the difference between communication and connection, right? That communication, and I always laugh at the term two-way communication because that really doesn't, right? So you already
Yeah,
know that
I
really doesn't
know.
exist, right?
Yeah,
It's I'm going to convey a message. It's going to land with you or it's not, and then you're going to volley back some other message. That's, by definition, that's one way at a time. Um, and I think leaders confuse communication with connection. They think, well, I have passed the message down to the troops. I've given them an update on where we are and where we're going and why that's important and blah blah blah. And I've done my job. And they fail to um, make sure that there's a connection, that that message has landed, that the correct meaning has been attached to that, and it's a message that their people can embrace, can relate to, and can contribute to. And that's just in the working world. Now
yeah,
you go out into the global society, and it becomes amplified. That need to make a connection. And I think, to your point, the true leaders in society, in our everyday life, in our communities, let alone in our workplace, um, just naturally have an affinity for making those connections and making sure that those connections exist.
yeah. I'm going to call out Christina's comments. Yes, the number one thing people need is to belong. Martin, you are here to model the way, as is Claire, so am I. That's the thing. So, three people involved in this conversation. We're here to make that change and belong. Because inclusion and diversity now is talking about equity and belonging, creating a sense of belonging. I'm not aware of all of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but a sense of belonging is only the third. I think the fifth is self-assured, and
Yeah.
I'm like, so really, we're now just creating a sense of belonging. So we've got a long way to go, but leaders inspire people. They can bring about that change. It shouldn't take a crisis to bring about change.
It shouldn't, and Christine's comment is so right on. This need, this inherent human need for belonging, right? So the connection comes if I feel like I'm in a room, an environment, in a community, in a company where I can feel safe to bring out my best ideas, my best talents, and my full personality, right? And I always say I'm a survivor of corporate America.
Yeah,
And after swearing after college, I would never go into corporate. Lo and behold, that's where I spent
yeah,
close to 20 years before I went into consulting. And corporate is a wonderful experimental lab, right? It's a wonderful learning opportunity to learn best practices, to kind of grow and to hone your craft. But if you are a person who ultimately does not feel fulfilled and complete because you're put into a box that has very firm walls around it, and you can't color outside of these lines because that's not corporate enough,
yeah,
eventually you have a decision to make. You either decide to conform to that box, or you decide to take that leap and move on and go after what you're passionate about.
and up until this year, we probably would have said, you move on, and you always have to put yourself first and your psychological and physical safety. But the leadership of people who this year, even anonymously, kind of just spoken out, and I'm going to cite Nike, because Nike has been a huge supporter of the African American community, yet has been caught out when former employees have created Instagram and Twitter and shared their experience of racism,
Right.
and that has actually forced Nike to go and take further action. Ben, thank you so much. Sorry I'm late to the party. Ben interviewed me on his podcast earlier in the year, and 2 weeks ago, Out.com published a story about the World Gay Boxing Championships, which I'm leading. So Ben making that connection with me meant an article he was quoted, or what we just talked about was actually quoted in an article in one of the biggest LGBTQ journals in the world. So that had created a sense of belonging through interview with Ben, the friendships we've made, and then somebody else has gone and seen that, and that it's kind of all over the internet. But the crisis isn't there. The leadership is trying to make a difference, but through the hands of friendships, that's what's made the real meaningful difference because we were able to communicate our message.
That's right. I knew that about Ben and about out.com. He actually shared that with me. He was so proud that he was mentioned there, and he
Yeah.
said, this is such a great day.
Yeah.
I remember when he reached
Yeah.
out and shared that with me. So
So what's next? I want to talk about Talent Boost. Tell me about Talent
sure.
Boost.
So Talent Boost. So like I said, I'm a survivor of corporate America. Spent close to 20 years in corporate roles, and in 2011, um, I got diagnosed with cancer. And it came out of the blue. Wasn't expecting it. I mean, you never expect that, right? And
Sorry
it
to
was
hear
one
that.
of those. Well, yeah, I'm cancer free now,
Yeah.
so thank you. It was one of those experiences, and people look at me sideways when I say what I'm about to say. It was it was a very challenging year. It was probably the most difficult year of my life, but it was the best year of my life. Getting cancer, let alone beating it and all of that was of course transformational in itself. Getting cancer was the the impetus that I needed to stop playing my life so small. And what I mean by that is I was at the time being groomed for an executive level position in human resources. And I was traveling a lot and I was working very hard and I had a wonderful team under me. But I was working so much that I was able to outrun that voice in my head that was waiting to ask me, are you doing what you're passionate about? Are you truly living, your fullest life? And so, boom, cancer diagnosis, take a leave of absence, get that handled. I was away from work and everything for a month, and I finally came face to face with that question. And when you find that the answer is no, you're not doing what you're passionate about. You're not playing full out. You have to do something with that, right? And so I went back to work. I finished off a few things that I had been working on, and my company and I parted ways quite amicably. And I didn't have a grand plan. I didn't have everything sort of figured
Yeah.
out. I just knew, that was my year. That was my moment when it really hit home for me. Life is too short not to do what you are truly in love with doing. And so that led me to kind of jump out into the consulting world. And 2 years later, in September of 2013, I formed Talent Boost around the niche that I had ultimately carved, which is to work with um, executive leadership teams and their organizations um, to build their business better.
Yeah.
Right. So to build a company that employees are proud to be part of, that customers gravitate to, and that can be hugely successful for the right reasons.
It is the right reasons because I worked in big corporations and I used to feel like really senior stakeholders, and I don't know what I developed the courage. But then I notice as soon as you're walking past somebody, if they're actively engaging eye contact and smiling with you, and that's a fellow human being, versus those other executive stakeholders. As soon as you just have no further use.
Yeah.
I remember where at Purple Day there was one senior executive was so keen to be involved and publicly because when the company's X and Y supports LGBTQ youth. I asked this individual would they mentor me. Never got a response. And I think another time I walked into the organisation, I wasn't certainly dressed in a certain way, and this individual shaking their head, that look of disapproval. They don't particularly know the reason why I was there, but shaking their head. And then this individual doesn't live too far away from me, and I no longer work in the organisation, yet has actually stared at me when I've been out with my friends. I was wearing like a Buck Honors baseball cap and this, and I'm like, you know what? We're two people who live in the same suburb. I no longer work. You no longer work there, and yet there was obviously that first thing of leadership was not. There was no connection.
Right.
It was convenient for you to be standing next to me as I was giving up my time to raise awareness for something. You want to be associated with that, but you certainly weren't the mentor for me.
And it's, again, it's crazy because at the end of the day, regardless of the title you have professionally, the size of your office, the percentage of leather you have in your chair, right? We're all humans at the end of the day. We all have personal lives, private lives, family of some form, community, that we are involved in to some degree. When did we stop seeing each other as people first? And it's part of what I ultimately had to acknowledge for myself. Didn't work for me in trying to fit my personality into a corporate box because most corporations talk a very good game about, we want you to, we're looking for people with an entrepreneurial spirit, right? That's always kind of a buzzword in every job posting. We want an
Yeah,
entrepreneurial spirit. We want you to feel that you can bring your unique talents to bear into our company and make us more innovative and all of that. Um, and almost every company advertises that, but very few deliver on that promise. And unfortunately, it's more often than not the experience that you had, which is when the cameras are on, I'm fine going to a diversity day or
yeah,
standing up next to Martin for a photo op. But when it comes to doing the work of leadership, which is to bring along and bring up the next generation of leaders and help, show them the path to strengthening our culture and what we really want to be about. And they either decline that or worse yet, ignore the request. I find that so hypocritical in a lot of organizations, and it's
yeah,
it's part of the toxicity that is too pervasive.
yeah. I'm just gonna say, Christina, this is exciting. Sevda is my amazing friend in the UK, doing amazing things with inclusion and coaching. Absolutely living deeply only way. Ben Carpe Diem. I'm actually gonna talk about. I'm not gonna name the company, but the CEO of one of Australia's largest companies, who impressed me in a way that I was not expecting.
Mm.
I wanted to find out what this company was doing to support Indigenous businesses and around a reconciliation plan. I have a large network on LinkedIn. I didn't have the CEO's email address, but I just used one of my free, like 15 personal messages a month, sent a message saying, just keen to know what you're doing. I'm a customer, really keen to know. Within 2 days, I had a personal response from the CEO of one of Australia's largest corporations. Now, most of the message was obviously curated by marketing because it was about, this is what we're doing. But and it was like, warm regards, thanks for contacting me. By the way, if you need anything in the future, here is the right email address. And it was like a email address for VIPs. I was so impressed that the CEO had taken their time to respond, not got anybody else to do it, but with a way of me contacting him in the future. And
That's amazing.
it showed to me when corporations talk about inclusion and diversity, this one clearly does it.
What's interesting in all of that is CEOs, in my experience, um, don't fully appreciate the impact they have on the people that they're leading. And we've all seen the studies of the overwhelming majority of successful corporate C-suite executives are by nature narcissistic, and they are ego driven, and they're all of those things. And that's probably true. But even the most narcissistic, ego driven leaders don't fully appreciate the impact their words, their actions, and their inaction have on the people who are, because they're paying
Yeah,
attention, right? The employees see what is rewarded, what is tolerated, what is advanced in a company. And for a CEO like that, it didn't take a huge chunk of time for him to do that. But how many of those types of requests does he get? And maybe he doesn't get many because maybe
yeah,
not a lot of people have sort of the chutzpah that you did to say, I'm going to reach out to him, because the worst thing that can happen is he ignores the request.
yeah,
But I've been pleasantly surprised by some people I've reached out to on LinkedIn that I've thought the same thing. Never in a million years will they even
yeah.
acknowledge the message. And it's the ones that I least expected, who are like these big names, who understand that and it's not about being a celebrity. Without my fans, I'm nothing. It's, I'm a leader, And without acknowledging people, I'm not really a leader.
Yeah, I mean, a few people I've connected with the last 18 months, and just you send a message. And people, executives are busy, but just getting, look, thank you so much, wish you the best, creates that sense of belonging because you don't know what you're going to be doing in the future. Your paths may cross at some stage, and for stuff that we're doing, you're collaborating with my great mate Ben. I'm the CEO of the World Gay Boxing Championships. I've been in Out.com with more so I'm going to be having to approach corporate and say, hey, can you help us change and disrupt homophobia in sport? It's something that companies will probably want to do, but we want relationships with the right organisations and the right leaders, not ones who just want to support the rainbow dollar because it makes sense, because it's worth it for them.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think people are coming to appreciate, business leaders are coming to appreciate the true power of social media. I've joked at least a couple of times this week. Thank God we did not have Facebook when I was growing up, because there's no video documentation of some of the stupid things I did as a kid, right? Um,
Yeah.
but on the flip side, of course, social media is helping the little guy hold these big companies accountable.
Yeah.
Among its other uses, but it's giving more people a voice, more people a platform, and it's one of the surprisingly positive ways that technology is helping deepen connections across the globe.
Yeah.
And it's so needed. I mean, to the point you made from the top, that the connection between humans on a person to person level is so vital, and especially in a time when we have had to take a step back from that because of COVID.
Yeah, and things. I was listening to the radio a few months ago, and there was the CEO of one of Australia's largest financial services companies, and it was refreshing because I heard him say, "We're not sure what it's going to be like. We're going to have to change." And he was saying how he's just wearing his tracky dacks and he gets out of bed and he works from home. He was just sharing his personal way of coping. You wouldn't expect the CEO of a company to be doing that. He said, "We're going to have to change. It's okay. We'll be fine." But just sharing something personal about himself. And rather than, no, we're in good shape, employees are going to have to do this, it creates that sense of belonging. We're all in this together.
And it also shows his humanity,
Yeah.
right? It's one of the things that Ben and I had a conversation around, and it appears in the book. That leaders often make the mistake of thinking that if they admit they don't know something, it's a sign of weakness.
Mm.
And read anything or watch anything from Brene Brown as one example, who talks so much about the power of vulnerability. Vulnerability is not the same as weakness.
Mm.
Vulnerability reminds the people that you're leading that you are not perfect, because guess what? They already knew that, right? You are human, you are flawed like everyone else, but you're also self-aware enough to admit that. And the fact that the CEO would sort of let you in a little bit on his personal life, um, you know, I think is wonderful, because I think he
Mm.
gets it. I think he gets the fact that your people will follow you farther and on a deeper level if you are self-aware enough to show the human side of who you really are.
Yeah, and we're using he and white straight males, and that's, I'm going to call that out because two individuals who we've spoken about are probably creating a culture of change, leading beyond the crisis, because we all want equality, we all want fairness, we all want those opportunities, but it's those people in positions of power who can make and influence that change. So for me, I know at least two of Australia's largest corporations, from what I've listened to on the radio and the second through a personal interaction, I know at least are doing something to drive change and not maintain the status quo. Because that's the worst thing, is maintaining the status quo, because they're scared of their brand and their reputation. And I'm afraid when you fear your reputation, you take action which isn't kind. And we
That's
want
right.
leadership to be about kindness.
We absolutely do. And if you fear change and you just embrace the status quo, to the detriment of anything else, you're going to be left behind. That's one of the other things that Ben and I talk about in the book, is this This myth that some companies are holding on to that, well, once the worst of the crisis is over, we can go back to business as usual. Well, that ground has permanently shifted, right? That does not exist anymore.
Mm.
And anyone who thinks or demands a full return to the way things were is truly going to be left behind. You're going to be left behind by your customers, your competitors, and the right talent to try to bring you forward. So there's
Mm.
this openness, this vulnerability, this transparency that savvy leaders going through this shared global crisis are embracing and not running from.
Ben says leadership is a mindset and not a job title.
That's right.
It's not sure what it's like in America, but obviously we've been in lockdown and we haven't been able to kind of go into the city, go into the office. People have really started supporting small businesses, small cafes, going back to the way things used to be. I think it was certainly with my grandparents' generation. Has that been the same in America?
So it depends on the area. One of the things, if you've been watching any of the American news, we've had a bit of a tug of war between the federal government and the state governments on who's handling crisis management, the response, and access to testing and all of that sort of thing. So it's largely been left up to the states to sort of regulate and set forth restrictions, enforce restrictions, roll them back, reinforce them. Um, and it also depends, even within states, if you're in a more densely populated city area, the restrictions tend to be a bit tighter. I was speaking with a gentleman who is in Alabama um, just a couple of days ago, and he said it's largely the restrictions have largely been lifted because where he is more rural. They're more spread out, and we're also in summertime here, so it's I guess thankfully a lot of the restaurants that had to shut down in the spring can accommodate the restrictions around
Mm.
having to have outdoor seating versus indoor. Um, and so, I do see a lot more support of an outreach to the smaller businesses because so many of them so visibly were impacted, far worse than the bigger companies and the bigger chains. So, we often, at least in New Jersey, and I know a lot of other states have um, big movements to support local businesses, and that was, before 2020. Um, and it's always nice to see because as a solopreneur myself, seeing that kind of rallying cry to support, the little guy, is always quite comforting, I think.
Yeah, it's. I work in procurement, and we're often talking about reducing the tail spend and the number of small suppliers. But I think there's going to be a trend backwards because you think about innovation, disruption from those companies who are starting out. Why do you not want to be part of that journey? But it's also about providing opportunities for people, for smaller businesses, for communities, for diverse communities. Including companies in your supply chain is better than excluding. Um, you've got the big corporations now committing to spend X million with black and minority owned businesses. This is nothing new. It started in 1968 with General Motors.
That's right.
So it's nothing new, and your big commitments, I'm sorry I'm calling that out as too little, too late. Please you join the bandwagon. Please make the change. It's no longer good enough to be, we are supporting X amount for the community. It's no longer enough.
And so many corporations still, as you said, since 1968, so many corporations have not evolved much past thinking diversity is best expressed through their expenses,
Mm.
right? Through the vendors that they participate with. It's not about vendor spend.
No.
It's not about vendor spend. It is about opening the doors and making connections truly with the fabric of your community and the uniqueness and all of the talents and the perspectives and the value of that. You talk about being in procurement, and I agree. A lot of corporations say, well, the bigger the vendor, the more economy of scale, the more cost efficiency we can realize. What I think they're starting to see, and what I hope they are paying attention to, is that it's the smaller companies that can be far more flexible, can be far more innovative. In New Jersey, it was only in the last several years that the small microbreweries started to pop up
Yeah,
because the state regulations had been so stringent before that. So all of a sudden, it's a booming industry here, but they are all different, separate, independent, brewmasters and
yeah.
distributors. And so COVID struck, and all of a sudden we thought, oh my gosh, like the whole microbrewing industry that we had been waiting for to come to New Jersey is going to go under. And a surprising thing happened. They got very creative. And yes, some of them closed down during the thick of it, the height of the spring. But a lot of them pivoted in terms of, you hear a lot of stories of some of the alcohol distilleries turning to making hand sanitizer. Others sort of, didn't worry so much about serving, their clientele as they did supporting their community in other ways. So I think those smaller, independent businesses, entrepreneurs, people are quick to just sort of label them all vendors. Um, these passion projects of theirs, they'll be damned if they're going to go under. And so they saw this opportunity to evolve or die. And it's that type of thinking, it's that type of resilience, it's that type of adaptability that companies need to recognize, reward, and incorporate into their cultures. Otherwise, they're the ones that are going to die out.
Is there a sense, this is the sense I'm certainly getting here in Australia, is that we're in our deepest recession, in a global pandemic. Australia actually has gone through a record of not having a recession for 30 years, almost. We've,
Wow.
we've had major reforms, and we've had, for the last decade, we had like 6 prime ministers. It was ridiculous. We had no leadership at the federal level. But there's a sense that people are ready to go back to work, ready to get back into. So I think that the recovery will be stronger because we've kind of gone, yeah, we've accepted it and we're going to deal with it and we're going to move back. Whereas I think the GFC, it just took so much out of people. But I think people are like, we played no role in this, we've been affected by it, but as a community we're stronger together. Is that happening in America? Because all we hear is the negative news.
Yeah, so I will do my best to filter through some of that smoke
Yeah,
of the negative news, because of course that's what gets airtime,
right,
right?
yeah.
Is all the negativity. I think people are. It does come back to connection, right? I think at the employee level, at the individual level, at the patron level of restaurants and stores, etc. We are so starved for connection with our fellow human beings in ways that probably surprise a lot of us, that we are quite eager to get back to not business as usual, but get back to in-person gatherings, in-person meetings, in-person work. And people call it Zoom fatigue, and they call it, all these other things. The reality is we miss the human connection. I miss shaking hands with people. Like, I'll go to meet with a client, and it was always standard practice to shake people's hand. And now, and it would be rude not to. And now
Exactly.
it's a health crisis if you try to do that. So I think, at the employee level, they're hungry to not go back to an office Monday through Friday 9 to 5, but have a little bit more latitude and flexibility to get together with their colleagues. And right now, it's late August. It's about to be the 1st of September. So of course schools are going back into session. That is the current kind of hotspot in terms of a crisis point and decision. And so the COVID response had been pushed down to the states. The school response of, will you return to the classroom? Will it be physically distanced? Will it be virtual? Will it be a combination? has largely been pushed down from the state to individual school systems. So, again, we continue to dilute our ability to respond to these things and make decisions on a macro level. And, there are certain circumstances or certain, situations that have to be customized and individualized, and I get that. But, in a time where none of us were prepared for a global pandemic, and nobody has all the answers, it is disappointing to me that not enough leaders have risen above the noise and the political divide and the turf wars to get together and say, enough of all of that. We can get back to bickering, when we've knocked this out. But this is a real, present danger, and we need to come together and bring in the best of the best and filter out all the other noise and get this accomplished. At the lower levels, that's happening. One of the things you said at the top of this conversation was that, with your recent health crisis, everyone without exception kind of rose to that challenge and really took care of you. And it wasn't about pulling rank, and it wasn't about, well, that part's not my job. It's those lessons and it's those examples that the executive leadership of companies and the leadership in government, and I don't really want to go there, but all the leaders really need to take a lesson from and say, let's do what's right first, and we'll figure out who gets the credit later.
So Ben says, I can echo all of this in Canada. When I was in hospital last week, there was a lady with Alzheimer's who was kind of just walking into the bay, and the nurse says, I don't think they want you to visit. And this lady was like, it's okay, I live here, I know these people. And then I said, maybe you can come back and visit tomorrow. And there was just incredible humanity, just taking care of an elderly lady who was walking, just needed to be guided back. She was clearly unwell, but she came in with that. You could tell what such a beautiful human being this lady is. She said, I know these people have come to visit friends. And this health system, public health system, was there to make sure she was okay. And there was just such a spirit of humanity. And I think that's the leadership, is that spirit of humanity that we've been craving. People have been so angry for the last few years, and I don't like the anger. I want people to smile, laugh, be divas, and have fun.
We need more divas, Martin. We absolutely do. No, but I mean, let's dive into that just for a second, because we're laughing about that, but what's a diva? You hear the word diva and you think, oh, it's people that are highly temperamental. It's not. It's divas are the ones who are, living their fullest life and don't care whether you approve of them or not, right? That's living your diva life.
Yeah. And they make you laugh. And I think I've had a conversation just about how many genders there are. One of my close friends, trans female, and we said there were two genders. There's divas and boring people, because divas are living their life to their fullest. It's politically incorrect, but we talk about gender identity, and it's like, well, it's been made, it's complicated. Let's just celebrate, be respectful to other human beings. Right. Ben says divas are us. Absolutely. We should all be a diva. Should all be.
We're all divas, Ben. Ben is a total diva. Don't even let him fool you.
Ben is the biggest diva.
He's a total diva.
Yeah. Well, just to wrap up, do you have any kind of any final words and final messages?
I just, I've had the distinct pleasure and honor of being on several podcasts over the last couple of months, especially with COVID kind of shutting us in. And I can't remember one that has gone so outside of the box of the corporate, tell me about the business world and what people are facing. And while we touched upon that, I applaud that you just kind of blew up the walls of that. And said the things that businesses are struggling with go far beyond that. It's a societal need for better connection, better acceptance, and way more love and way more divas.
Yeah, I think that's the final word. Way more divas. I'm going to give the final word to Ben. I embrace my inner diva.
I love it.
But everybody watching, thank you so much, and I'm going to be back online with Junaid Iqbal on Sunday, who inspired me to do LinkedIn Live. So I'm going to be talking about that on Sunday. Thanks very much for your time, Claire.
Thanks, Martin.